The crystalline observation deck of Galactic Conclave Station, harmonious unity, offered an unparalleled view of approaching vessels. Admiral Zix Toril of the Jaxian Empire stood with his forearms clasped behind his back, mandibles twitching with poorly concealed irritation as he studied the lone ship that had just dropped out of FTL at the designated arrival coordinates. "Magnify Sector 7, he ordered, his voice a controlled rumble that nonetheless caused the junior officers to stiffen. The holographic display zoomed in on the human vessel. Small by conclave standards, its sleek charcoal hull absorbed rather than reflected the light of the nearby star. No ostentatious markings or decorative elements adorned its surface, just the simple designation UES Prometheus in modest lettering along its forward section. "This is insulting," hissed Sub-Commander Vexinar, Zix Toril's most trusted advisor. The invitation clearly stated the diplomatic requirements. All 37 species currently awaiting admission arrived with proper entourages. The Admiral's upper eyes narrowed while his lower set remained fixed on the vessel's unusual propulsion signature. The Delveri brought 23 ships. Even the resource-poor Ithri managed 7. "Perhaps humans lack the capabilities for proper representation," suggested Vexinar. "Our intelligence indicates otherwise," replied Zix Toril. "Their system contains abundant resources, and their technological advancement, while uneven, includes several innovations our analysts cannot fully explain." He gestured to a nearby communications officer. "Hail them." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a human female with bronze skin and dark hair pulled tightly back from a face that betrayed no emotion whatsoever. 2 golden insignia adorned her otherwise plain black uniform. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth ship Prometheus, responding to the Conclave's invitation for diplomatic exchange." Zix Toril performed the formal greeting gestures with mechanical precision. "Captain, we acknowledge your arrival. However, there appears to be a misunderstanding. The diplomatic protocols call for a full delegation. Where is the remainder of your fleet?" The captain's expression remained unchanged. "There is no misunderstanding, Admiral. Earth sent what was deemed necessary for initial evaluation." Evaluation. The word tasted bitter in Zix Toril's mouth. "The Conclave does not submit to evaluation by potential members. You are here to be assessed for worthiness." Something flickered in Vasquez's dark eyes. Amusement, perhaps. "With respect, Admiral, mutual assessment seems the only logical approach to potential alliance. We look forward to docking procedures." The transmission cut before Zix Toril could respond, an action so unexpected that several officers gasped audibly. "Arrogance," snarled Vexinar. "They should be denied entry for such behavior." The Admiral's chitinous fingers tapped rhythmically against his ceremonial armor. "No, their insolence will be addressed through proper channels. Route their docking authorization to Bay 17. Bay 17. But that's adjacent to the maintenance sectors, not the diplomatic wing." "Precisely." Zix Toril's mandibles clicked in what passed for a Jaxian smile. "Let them understand their position in the hierarchy from the moment they board." Aboard the Prometheus, Vasquez turned from the communications array to her executive officer. "As predicted, Commander Chen, they've taken offense." Chen nodded, his eyes scanning incoming data streams. "Docking protocols received. They're directing us to a secondary bay, approximately 2.7 kilometers from the diplomatic center." "Perfect." Vasquez tapped a sequence into her command console. "Activate passive scanning suite Alpha through Epsilon. Full spectrum, minimal emission signature." "Captain." Chen hesitated. "That level of scanning without declaration violates at least 6 Conclave protocols." Vasquez's expression softened slightly. "Which is why they must never detect it, Commander. We're not here to join their club without understanding its true rules." She addressed the bridge crew. "Remember your briefings. Every interaction is a data point. Trust nothing in official channels. Observe everything." As the Prometheus glided toward the massive station, a gleaming construct of interlocking rings around a central spherical hub, Vasquez studied the dozens of alien vessels arranged in ceremonial formation, each fleet representing a prospective member species, each trying to outshine the others in number and grandeur. "They're all playing the same game," she murmured, "competing by the same metrics." "And we're not," Chen concluded. Vasquez nodded. "Humanity tried that approach once. The result was 17 separate extinction-level events in our history." Her eyes hardened as the docking clamps engage. "We've learned better." The grand chamber of interspecies discourse stretched nearly half a kilometer across, its vaulted ceiling adorned with astronomical charts, mapping the territories of full conclave members. Captain Vasquez entered alone, her footsteps echoing in the momentary hush that fell across the assembly. 219 representatives from 37 species watched the solitary human approach the central speaking days. High Counselor Vetmara, an imposing figure whose translucent skin revealed the complex circulatory system beneath, activated the ceremonial chimes. "The conclave recognizes the Earth representative. You may present your credentials and petition." Instead of proceeding to the ornate credential reader as expected, Vasquez simply inclined her head. "I observed these proceedings with interest." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Bicari delegation, feathered bipeds with elaborate ceremonial headdresses, trilled in obvious distress at the protocol breach. "Perhaps," Vetmara suggested with practiced diplomacy, "the human delegate misunderstands our customs. Each petitioning civilization must present their achievements, territories, and contributions to galactic culture." "I understand perfectly," Vasquez replied, her voice carrying effortlessly despite its measured tone. "However, achievements should be evident without enumeration. Earth prefers to listen before speaking." Admiral Zix Toral's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation his species couldn't easily conceal. The human insults this body with such reticence. Perhaps they have nothing worthy to present. The chamber waited for Vasquez's anger or defense. Neither came. She simply took her designated seat and activated a small recording device on her wrist. The ceremonial introductions continued. The Volturi Collective presented holographic displays of their 17 conquered star systems. The Keltari hegemony described their pioneering work in gravitic manipulation. Each species followed with increasingly elaborate presentations, occasionally glancing toward the silent human who watched with unnerving focus. Later, during the networking reception, Vasquez moved through the crowd with unexpected grace. Ambassador Lethvari of the Delvari approached her first, his elongated fingers clutching a datapad. "Your species' mathematical models intrigue us," he began cautiously, "particularly your work on dimensional folding." "Impressive," Vasquez responded, switching seamlessly to High Delvari, a language humans weren't supposed to have encountered yet, especially since we've published nothing on dimensional folding in interspecies academic exchanges. The Delvari's eyes widened, their characteristic purple darkening with shock. Before he could respond, Vasquez continued in perfect Delvari idiom. "The calculations your team abandoned 3 cycles ago actually held promise. The error was in the 4th subspatial coefficient." She moved away, leaving the mathematician staring after her. Similar encounters repeated throughout the evening. To the Bicari cultural attaché, she hummed the first notes of their sacred emergence hymn. With the Ithri philosophers, she referenced obscure ethical frameworks from their pre-space civilization. From the periphery, Admiral Zix Toral observed with growing unease. "The human knows too much," he muttered to Vexinar. "Every species reports the same. She speaks their languages, references internal cultural matters, even knows of classified research projects." "Impossible," Vexinar replied. Their first contact with non-Earth species was documented only 14 months ago. The Admiral's eyes followed Vasquez as she approached Invera, representative of the subjugated Nevaran people, officially present only as part of the Jaxian delegation. The small gray-skinned alien dropped his ceremonial drinking vessel in surprise when Vasquez addressed him. With inhuman speed, Vasquez caught the ornate cup before it shattered on the polished floor. She returned it with a slight bow, whispering something that made the Nevaran's eyes widen. "What did she say?" Zix Toril demanded later, cornering Anvera in a private corridor. The Nevaran trembled. She said the humans have been watching. She said liberation comes to those with patience. That night, Zix Toril requested an emergency security briefing. "Find out everything about their ship," he ordered. "Scan every centimeter, monitor all communications, and prepare a challenge that will expose these humans for what they truly are, primitives play-acting at sophistication." Meanwhile, in her austere quarters near the maintenance sector, Vasquez reviewed the day's recordings with Commander Chen. "Initial assessment?" she asked. Chen's expression was grim. "The power dynamics are worse than intelligence suggested. At least 9 species are essentially slaves, 3 more are being systematically exploited, and the Jaxians control far more than they admit publicly." Vasquez nodded. "Prepare the Phase 2 package for transmission. Earth needs to see this before we decide whether to proceed. And if they decide against Conclave membership," her eyes met his, "then we implement contingency protocol Shadowfall. Either way, the Conclave will never be the same after encountering humanity." "The Etherian Nebula Challenge is a proud tradition," announced Sub-Counselor Jexanar of the Conclave Naval Authority. The assembled diplomats and military attaches murmured appreciatively as the holographic display depicted a massive cloud of ionized gases dotted with gravitational anomalies and radiation pockets in vibrant false colors. Navigating its currents tests both vessel and crew. The Conclave invites our prospective members to demonstrate their capabilities. Vasquez studied the projected course, a treacherous 27-parsec journey through the densest section of the nebula. She recognized the true purpose immediately. This wasn't tradition. This was Admiral Zix Toril's attempt to put humanity in its place. "The Prometheus accepts," she stated simply, ignoring the startled looks from the other delegations. Traditionally, species selected their most advanced vessels for such demonstrations, not their diplomatic transports. The competition was scheduled for the following cycle. As Vasquez returned to her ship, she found Commander Chen reviewing sensor data in his quarters. "They've been scanning us," he reported. 7 different directed energy signatures in the past 6 hours alone. And Chen allowed himself a rare smile. Phase-adaptive hull plating worked perfectly. Each scan returned exactly what we wanted them to see: a moderately advanced vessel with conventional propulsion and standard defensive capabilities. "Good. What about the nebula data?" "Compiled and analyzed." Chen projected a detailed 3-dimensional map. "The official course contains 17 deliberate hazards not included in their briefing materials. The Jaxian vessels know the safe passage coordinates." Vasquez nodded. "Predictable. Prepare the Whisper drive for field test. We'll deploy surveillance microdrones along the course tonight." "That's against at least 8 Conclave regulations." "Yes, Commander, I'm well aware." Her eyes hardened. "They've designed this challenge to humiliate us. We're going to use it to educate them instead." The morning of the competition arrived with appropriate ceremony. 12 vessels assembled at the nebula's edge, 10 representing prospective member species, plus 2 Jaxian observer ships supposedly present to monitor safety protocols. The Prometheus looked distinctly underwhelming among the larger, more ornate vessels. "Beginning countdown," announced the Conclave controller. "Navigation challenge commences in 3, 2, 1. The assembled ships accelerated into the swirling gases, all except the Prometheus, which simply vanished. "Human vessel has experienced drive failure," reported a Jaxian technician, unable to hide his satisfaction. "No energy signature detected." Admiral Zix Toril permitted himself a satisfied click of his mandibles. "As expected, their primitive technology cannot." "Admiral," interrupted the sensor officer, her voice quavering. "We're receiving automated distress signals from 3 vessels. The radiation density in Sector 12 is twice what our charts indicated." Zix Toril frowned. "Impossible. We calibrated those readings ourselves. The nebula crossing took nearly 6 hours. Of the 12 vessels that entered, only 7 completed the course without requiring emergency assistance. The 2 Jaxian observers suffered critical navigation system failures when passing through an unexpected gravimetric shear. As the battered ships limped toward the designated endpoint, they discovered the Prometheus already in position, running on minimal power with only its position lights active. Admiral Zix Toril personally led the boarding party, rage evident in his rigid posture. They found Captain Vasquez alone on the bridge, reviewing data on a holographic display. "Explain yourself," he demanded. "How did you arrive before any other vessel?" Vasquez looked up calmly. "We took a more efficient route." "There is no more efficient route. The course was fixed. Only if one accepts artificial constraints." She tapped her console, projecting a new map of the nebula. "Your probe network hasn't mapped the vortex currents properly in over 60 years. We found significant discrepancies." The Admiral stared at the display, recognizing with growing horror that the human chart contained details even Jaxian military surveys had missed. "This is classified information. How did you?" "We observed," Vasquez interrupted. "It's what humans do. We observe, adapt, and overcome." She stood, shutting down the display. "By the way, your ship's shield harmonics fluctuated dangerously when passing through the radiation fields. You might want to address that vulnerability before someone exploits it." That evening, as Conclave technicians swarmed over the competing vessels conducting routine inspections, Commander Chen reported their findings to Vasquez in secure quarters. "They're desperate to understand how we navigated the nebula," he said. "They've scanned every centimeter of our hull. And they found exactly nothing. The Whisper drive components read as standard power couplings to their sensors." Vasquez nodded. "Phase 3 begins tomorrow. Transmit the activation codes to our assets in the Conclave security network. It's time to see how they respond to a genuine crisis." The grand banquet hall gleamed with ostentatious displays of wealth. Anti-gravity platforms suspended exotic delicacies from 100 worlds, while luminescent sculptures shifted forms to honor each species' cultural aesthetics. Captain Vasquez wore her dress uniform for the first time, still austere by Conclave standards, but adorned with a single row of unfamiliar medals that drew curious glances. The human finally attempts to impress. Admiral Zix Toril remarked to High Counselor that Mara as they observed Vasquez from across the chamber. "Though their decorations seem peculiarly understated, perhaps they signify something we don't understand," replied that Mara, her translucent skin pulsing with cautious colors. "After yesterday's nebula incident, I'm inclined to reassess many assumptions about humanity." The Admiral's mandibles tightened. One navigational trick doesn't. The lights extinguished suddenly, plunging the hall into darkness. Emergency lumens activated seconds later, casting harsh blue shadows across alarmed faces. A heavy metallic thunk echoed as security barriers slammed into place, dividing the vast room into isolated sections. "Security breach," announced the station's automated system. "All personnel remain in position." Shadows detached from the walls. Humanoid figures in dark combat suits materializing as if from nowhere. Their faces were obscured by featureless masks, but their movements possessed an unsettling fluidity. "This facility is now under the control of the Navarran Liberation Front," announced their leader, voice distorted by translation software. "For too long, the Conclave has permitted the subjugation of our people. Today, we claim justice." The infiltrators moved with precision, herding high-ranking officials into the center of each cordoned section. Admiral Zix Toril found himself trapped with High Counselor Thetmara, 2 Vulturi diplomats, and, surprisingly, Captain Vasquez. "Where is your security?" he hissed at Thetmara. "How did primitives breach the most secure station in the galaxy?" Vasquez, sitting calmly while chaos erupted around them, finally spoke. "Your security architecture is fundamentally flawed, Admiral. It prioritizes detecting external threats over internal vulnerabilities. You. Zix Toral's upper eyes narrowed. Your people are behind this. Not directly, she replied, checking her chronometer with casual interest. Though we did identify the weakness during our first hour aboard. Quite surprising no one addressed it in the 64 years since this station was constructed. A masked figure approached their section, weapon raised. Zix Toral instinctively moved to shield Thetmera, his vestigial warrior instincts overriding political calculation. Step aside, oppressor, commanded the figure. The High Counselor must answer for the Conclave's complicity. Stand down, Vask said quietly, rising to her feet. You've made your point. The masked figure hesitated, then lowered the weapon. Assessment parameters achieved. Fully documented, she confirmed. 86 minutes to total station compromise. Security response effectiveness at 12% of minimum acceptable standards. The figure reached up and removed its mask, revealing the gray features of Envera, the Nevaran representative. Around the chamber, other terrorists were similarly revealing themselves. Some Nevaran, others clearly members of different species. What is the meaning of this? Demanded Thetmera, her skin now pale with shock. Vasquez addressed the entire room, her voice carrying unnaturally well. This was a security demonstration, coordinated with selected representatives from oppressed conclave populations. No one was in actual danger. You had no authority, Zix Toral sputtered. Which is precisely how actual terrorists would operate, Vasquez replied evenly. Your station has been infiltrated 17 times in the past decade by various groups. 3 resulted in assassinations, 2 in data theft. None were officially acknowledged by Conclave leadership. A shocked silence fell across the chamber. Envera stepped forward. The human speaks truth. Many among us have suffered while the Conclave maintained the pretense of security and justice. Thetmera's skin flickered with troubled patterns. How could you possibly know about those incidents? They were classified at the highest levels. Vasquez's expression remained neutral. As I told the Admiral, we observe. And what we've observed suggests the Conclave requires significant structural reform before humanity would consider membership. The security barriers retracted with a hydraulic hiss. On the main view screens, status indicators returned to normal as control systems came back online. This demonstration is concluded, Vasquez announced. A full security assessment has been transmitted to all delegation leaders. I suggest reviewing it carefully before tomorrow's council session. As she walked calmly toward the exit, Admiral Zix Toral caught her arm. You've violated dozens of protocols. The Jaxian Empire demands satisfaction. Vasquez looked pointedly at his grip, then met his gaze. Remove your hand, Admiral, or what comes next will not be a demonstration. Something in her tone made him comply instinctively. The real question, she added quietly, isn't how we orchestrated today's event. It's why we bothered to show you your vulnerabilities instead of simply exploiting them. The emergency council chamber hummed with agitated energy. Unlike the grandiose main hall, this room was designed for crisis management, utilitarian, and secure. Representatives from the 12 most powerful conclave species sat around a circular table, their usual ornate attire replaced by functional diplomatic uniforms. Captain Vasquez entered last, escorted by 4 Kelteri security officers who seemed distinctly uncomfortable with their assignment. The human showed no reaction to the barely concealed hostility directed at her. The Council demands explanation for your actions, High Counselor Thetmera began, dispensing with formal protocols. You have destabilized diplomatic proceedings, violated multiple security directives, and collaborated with dissidents. Vasquez took her seat calmly. I believe collaborated with dissidents is your euphemism for exposed systemic oppression. Interesting framing. Admiral Zix Toral slammed a chitinous fist against the table. You will answer directly, human. By what authority did you orchestrate yesterday's disruption? By the authority of enlightened self-interest. Vasquez removed a small device from her pocket and placed it on the table. It projected a complex holographic web connecting every species in the room, with lines of varying thickness and color. This is what we observe when we look at the conclave power structure. The representatives leaned forward, studying the projection with growing alarm. The network showed resource flows, military alliances, and political dependencies that officially didn't exist. The Jaxian Empire extracts trilithium from Nevaran colonies while officially listing them as protective territories. Vasquez explained, highlighting one connection. The Vulturi provide mercenary forces to suppress Ithri religious practices in exchange for privileged trading status. The Kelteri supply advanced weapons to the Bikeri in direct violation of conclave technology-sharing protocols. These are internal matters, protested the Vulturi representative, his tendriled face darkening to a deep crimson. When evaluating potential allies, nothing is internal, Vasquez replied evenly. Every relationship pattern indicates character. Thetmera's translucent skin pulsed with complex emotions. You speak as if you're assessing us, not the reverse. Finally, understanding dawns. Vasquez nodded approvingly. Earth didn't send a delegation seeking membership. We sent an evaluation team to determine if the conclave meets our ethical standards for interstellar partnership. Stunned silence fell across the chamber. Impossible. The Bikeri representative's feathers stood on end. Your civilization has barely achieved interstellar capability. Your lone ship is exactly what we wanted you to see. Vasquez tapped her device, changing the display to show a map of conclave space with pulsing dots scattered throughout. Humanity established observation posts in 27 key locations throughout your territory over the past 6 years. We've monitored communications, analyzed trade patterns, and documented systematic abuses of power. The Jaxian admiral's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. No species could infiltrate conclave space undetected. Our sensor networks are designed to detect threats you understand. Vasquez interjected. Your technological paradigm relies on energy signatures we abandoned 3 generations ago. She highlighted several locations on the map. We've established direct contact with 18 conclave species. 12 immediately recognized our stealth technology, because they've been hiding their own advancement while under dominance from your respective empires. Treason, sputtered a Vulturi diplomat. Survival, corrected Vasquez. The oppressed adapt or perish. Humanity learned this lesson painfully over centuries of our own history. She stood, deactivating the projection. Tomorrow, I will present our findings to the full conclave assembly. Every species, dominant and subjugated alike, will receive the same data. What happens afterward depends on your collective response. You would destabilize a galactic alliance that has maintained peace for centuries. Thetmera asked, her voice carrying genuine concern. Vasquez's expression softened slightly. Peace for whom, counselor? A system that profits from subjugation isn't peaceful. It's just efficiently violent. She moved toward the door before turning back. Humanity has watched empires rise and fall on our single world. We've learned that true stability comes only from genuine justice. As the chamber erupted into chaotic argument behind her, Commander Chen waited in the corridor. Transmission from Earth Command. Captain, he reported quietly. Authorization for final phase granted. The Odysseus Protocol is active. Vasquez nodded. Then we proceed as planned. It's time to show them what one human ship can really do. Admiral Zix Toril stood on the command deck of the Jaxian dreadnought in inevitable dominance, watching as his battle fleet moved into position around the Prometheus. 20 warships, the pride of the Jaxian Imperial Navy, their plasma cannons powered and targeting systems locked on the solitary human vessel. The human leaves us no choice, he told his assembled captains via secure channel. Their provocations threaten the stability of the entire conclave. By emergency authorization of the Security Council, we will secure their vessel and technologies. He deliberately omitted mentioning that half the Security Council had opposed this action. Political nuance could be addressed after the humans were contained. All vessels report ready "Admiral," announced his tactical officer. Zix Toril nodded. "Open communication with the human ship." Captain Vasquez appeared on screen, her posture relaxed despite the weapons trained on her vessel. She seemed to be alone on the bridge. "Captain Vasquez, by authority of the Conclave Security Directive, you will power down your vessel and prepare for boarding. Your provocative actions have violated." "Admiral," Vasquez interrupted calmly, "I'm currently broadcasting this conversation to every diplomatic delegation and civilian habitat in the Conclave. Approximately 6 billion sentients are watching you surround a diplomatic vessel with military force." Zix Toril faltered momentarily before regaining his composure. "Your deceptions void any diplomatic protection." "A fair point," she conceded. "So let me be transparent now." She pressed a control on her console. "Commander Chen, please proceed." Nothing visible happened for several seconds. Then alerts began blaring across every vessel in the Jaxian fleet simultaneously. "Admiral," the sensor officer's voice cracked with stress, "we're detecting energy signatures, hundreds of them, appearing throughout Conclave space. On the main tactical display, points of light began appearing, first dozens, then hundreds, each signature matching no known configuration, but all undeniably powerful." "Impossible," whispered Zix Toril. "Phase shift deactivation complete," reported Vasquez's voice over the still-open channel. 347 vessels now visible to Conclave sensors. On screens throughout the station, and on every vessel in range, the same message was broadcasting. The image showed vast stretches of Conclave space, with human ships of various configurations appearing like stars suddenly emerging from behind a cloud. Some positioned near strategic resources, others shadowing military installations, still more in close proximity to civilian population centers. "For 6 years," Vasquez continued, her voice now addressing all who could hear, "humanity has observed the Conclave. We've learned your languages, studied your technologies, and evaluated your cultures not through official exchanges, but through direct observation." Across the station, diplomats stared at displays in stunned silence or erupted into panicked communications with their homeworlds. "The Prometheus was never our first vessel to enter your space," Vasquez explained. "It was simply the first we allowed you to see. Our evaluation required authentic behavior, not diplomatic performances." On the inevitable dominance, Admiral Zix Toril watched as 3 human vessels shimmered into visibility around his flagship, vessels that hadn't appeared even on his most sophisticated tactical sensors until this moment. "How?" he demanded, mandibles clicking in agitation. "No stealth technology, Cold." "As I explained previously," Vasquez replied, "you scan for what you understand. Humanity developed phase shift technology that operates on principles your science hasn't conceptualized yet. In the Conclave Central Hub, High Counselor that Mara called an emergency session, her skin pulsing with patterns that hadn't been seen in her species for generations, the chromatic signature of existential fear. "What are your intentions?" she asked directly when Vasquez's transmission reached the council chamber. "Is this an invasion?" "If we wanted to conquer, we would have done so without announcement," Vasquez replied. "This is a demonstration of transparency, something the Conclave leadership has failed to practice with its own members." She gestured to Commander Chen, who had appeared beside her. "My executive officer is now transmitting detailed dossiers on Conclave corruption, resource exploitation, and unregistered military operations to every member species simultaneously. We believe in informed consent before alliance." Admiral Zix Toril's voice cut through on a priority channel. "You've violated every principle off." "We've violated principles that perpetuate injustice," Vasquez countered. "Humanity extends an offer to the Conclave, reform or replacement. The choice is yours." Chaos engulfed the Conclave. Diplomatic channels overflowed with frantic communications as species confronted their supposed allies with evidence of betrayal. Military vessels from 17 different fleets broke formation, responding to emergency recall orders from their homeworlds. The carefully maintained facade of galactic cooperation crumbled in hours. Admiral Zix Toril paced the command deck of the inevitable Dominance, watching as his battle fleet's cohesion deteriorated. 3 Vulture cruisers had already withdrawn, claiming reassessment of strategic priorities. Even his own captains questioned their orders in thinly veiled communications. "This is the human strategy," he growled to his remaining loyal officers. "Create disorder, then exploit it. Classic divide and conquer tactics from a primitive species." His tactical officer approached hesitantly. "Admiral, we've detected unusual energy readings from the Prometheus. Their power core appears to be reconfiguring." Zix Toril's 4 eyes narrowed. "Weapon preparation." "Unknown, sir. The signature matches nothing in our database." The Admiral made his decision. "Launch boarding teams immediately. Secure the human vessel before they activate whatever weapon they're preparing." 6 assault shuttles disengaged from the Jaxian warships, streaking toward the Prometheus. The human vessel made no attempt to evade or defend itself. "No resistance detected," reported the lead assault team. "Breaching outer hull now." Aboard the Prometheus, Commander Chen monitored the boarding operation from a secondary command post. "They're in, Captain. 3 entry points." Vasquez nodded calmly. "Evacuation status. All personnel transferred except us. Phase shift transports are clear. Initiate final protocol." Vasquez pressed her palm against a biometric scanner. A small black cylinder rose from the center console, pulsing with soft blue light. "Signal the fleet. Operation Lighthouse is active." Throughout Conclave space, human vessels simultaneously transmitted the same message to all communications channels. "Attention all sentient beings. Humanity has activated a controlled singularity device aboard the Prometheus. If tampered with, it will create a rupture in spacetime approximately 2 light-years in diameter. This is not a threat, but a demonstration of final contingency technology." Aboard the Prometheus, Jaxian boarding teams moved through eerily empty corridors. "No crew detected," reported the squad leader. "They've abandoned the vessel." "Impossible," snapped Admiral Zix Toril over the comm. "Our sensors show no escape craft launched. Find them." The Jaxian teams converged on the bridge, weapons ready. They found it empty except for the pulsing black device on the captain's chair. "Unknown technology detected," reported the leader. "Appears to be the source of the energy readings." "Secure it," ordered Zix Toril. "Prepare for transport tow." "I wouldn't touch that if I were you," came Vasquez's voice, seemingly from nowhere. The Jaxian soldiers spun, weapons raised. A section of the bridge wall shimmered, and Captain Vasquez stepped through what had appeared to be solid metal, followed by Commander Chen. "Phase-shifted pocket dimension," she explained to the stunned soldiers. "We've been standing here the entire time." Admiral Zix Toril, watching through the squad leader's visual feed, felt his mandibles go slack. "What is that device, human?" "Exactly what our broadcast described," Vasquez replied. "A controlled singularity. The mathematics behind it are rather elegant, actually, creating a self-containing pocket of altered spacetime that can be collapsed on command." She approached the device but made no move to touch it. "Humanity developed this technology during our 3rd global conflict, centuries ago. We never deployed it, because we recognized a fundamental truth that the Conclave has forgotten. Power demands restraint." In the main conclave chamber, representatives from 83 species, dominant and subjugated alike, watched the transmission in stunned silence. "For most of our history, humans fought each other," Vasquez continued, now addressing her words to the wider audience. "We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times, not because we lacked technology or resources, but because we lacked wisdom." She gestured to the device. "We could have arrived in conclave space with these weapons unveiled, demanding compliance. Instead, we watched. We learned. We evaluated whether you deserve to know what really exists out in the darkness between stars." "And your verdict?" asked High Counselor Thetmera, her voice barely steady. Divided, Vasquez admitted. Some on Earth believe the Conclave is too corrupt to reform. Others see potential worth nurturing. Today's actions will determine which assessment prevails. She turned back to the Jaxian soldiers. You have two choices, Admiral. Withdraw your forces and embrace transformation, or maintain your empire and face humanity as adversaries. 3 days of unprecedented diplomatic activity followed. The Conclave Station, once a monument to carefully orchestrated power displays, transformed into a forum of genuine negotiation. Species that had never been permitted to address the full assembly now spoke openly. Historical grievances, long suppressed, were acknowledged. Resource-sharing agreements were drafted, then torn apart, then rebuilt on more equitable foundations. Captain Vasquez observed it all, maintaining a careful distance from the proceedings while humanity's fleet remained visible in conclave space, a constant reminder of what had been revealed. The Jaxian delegation has requested your presence, Commander Chen reported, entering Vasquez's temporary quarters in what had previously been a rarely used diplomatic annex. Admiral Zix Toril has been replaced by Sub-Ambassador Vexnar. Vasquez nodded. Interesting choice. Vexnar was one of the Admiral's closest advisors, and one of the first to recognize the need for adaptation, Chen added. Our intelligence suggests he's been quietly advocating reforms within the Empire for decades. In a small conference room, Vexnar waited alone. His ceremonial armor had been replaced by simple diplomatic attire, and his posture conveyed a humility previously unseen in Jaxian representatives. Captain, he began as Vasquez entered, the Jaxian Hierarchical Assembly has authorized me to present terms for a new relationship with humanity. I'm listening. We propose immediate withdrawal from Nevaran territories, compensation for extracted resources, and technology transfer to assist their redevelopment. Vexnar's mandibles moved in what Vasquez now recognized as a gesture of discomfort. In exchange, we request humanity's assistance with our own evolutionary challenge, which is, our species evolved as apex predators. Conquest is embedded in our biology in ways our science has struggled to address. We require guidance in transitioning to a post-expansionist civilization. Vasquez studied him thoughtfully. You're asking for humanity to teach you restraint. We ask for partnership in evolution, Vexnar clarified. Your species mastered its predatory instincts. Ours still struggles. Similar conversations occurred throughout the station. The Delveri mathematicians requested access to human quantum communication theories. The philosophical Ithri spent hours with human cultural attaches discussing ethical frameworks for interspecies governance. The artistic Bikari, after hearing Earth music for the first time, created spontaneous harmonic compositions that moved listeners of every species to emotional responses. On the final day, the reformed Conclave Council convened in the Grand Chamber. The seating arrangement, once hierarchical, had been reconfigured into a perfect circle. Representatives from all 83 species, including the newly liberated Nevarans, took their places as equals. High Counselor Thetmara, who had retained her position through the crisis through remarkable adaptability, addressed the assembly. Today marks a new era for our galactic community. The humans have shown us both our failings and our potential. Their evaluation of our worthiness for partnership continues, but they have agreed to provisional engagement while reforms progress. Captain Vasquez stood before the assembly. Humanity will establish an official embassy within the conclave. Selected representatives from your species will be invited to Earth to begin cultural exchange. Our ships will remain in conclave space, but phase shifted beyond detection, not as a threat, but as a safeguard while trust develops. As the session concluded, former Admiral Zix Toril, now stripped of rank, but permitted to observe as a civilian advisor, approached Vasquez in a quiet corridor. There's one question that haunts me, he said without preamble. You had us surrounded, infiltrated, and analyzed before we knew you existed. Your technology exceeds our understanding. You could have conquered us with minimal effort. Why this elaborate approach? Vasquez considered him thoughtfully. Because conquest wasn't our objective. Admiral, peace is harder than war. Restraint is more powerful than dominance. But why send only one visible ship? Why appear so vulnerable? Because we needed to see your authentic response to perceived weakness. It revealed more about the Conclave's character than any amount of formal diplomacy. She studied his expression, recognizing genuine curiosity rather than wounded pride. We sent one ship because humanity's history taught us a fundamental truth. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Power without wisdom destroys itself. Technology without ethics becomes a prison, not a tool. Zix Toril considered this. And if we had attacked the Prometheus immediately, if we had proven ourselves unworthy by your standards, then you would never have known we were there at all. Vasquez replied softly. Our ships would have disappeared, your records of our visit would have been erased, and the galactic community would have developed without Earth's involvement until you were ready. As she turned to leave, Zix Toril asked one final question. How many other species have you evaluated this way? Vasquez paused at the threshold. That, Admiral, remains classified. But I'll leave you with this thought. In a universe of possibilities, assuming you're alone is the most dangerous belief of all.